Please have it.
Revert to government business.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I promise I shall endeavor not to delay you or the House unduly, but just to add a couple of notes of consideration as we reflect on the bill before the House, which I think relates to a very important activity in both the economic and social life of Barbados, has implications for a whole scope of areas of life of extreme significance to us. Now, I want to start by the reefs, Mr. Speaker. And I think the Honourable Member for St. Michael South may very well have anticipated that I would have started on the reefs or around the reefs. I do so because I don't think that government to date has fully addressed the issue of damage caused by shipping to the reef formations around Barbados. I don't think that government sufficiently has addressed that concern and the consequences which ensued upon the event of having multiple ships anchored or berthed off Barbados. I'm not here to attack the Honourable Minister, my worthy friend out of St. Michael South. I'm here to speak to the issue and to ask for further ventilation on the matter because I have some serious concerns. We can't talk about shipping and improving the arrangements and conditions under which ships traverse our ports, enter and depart, without reference to the effect upon the reef formation around the country. The reason I want also to raise this today is to inquire further into the matter, because the Honourable Member, the Honourable Minister, when he did speak earlier, suggested that the Coastal Zone Management Unit, one of the entities that interacts with his ministry and his ministry's activities, are very much consulted and are part of the decision-making and the policy-shaping activities of the ministry. Now, I have to make reference, Mr. Speaker, to a document entitled Assessing Anchoring Impacts of Cruise Ships in Barbados during the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020. Now, this is a document that comes out of the university. If it is not as yet a document of the House, I'm prepared to make it that. But it is compiled by the CERMES, Center for Resource Management and Environmental Studies, Faculty of Science and Technology, University of the West Indies, Cavehill Campus, Barbados, April 2021. I don't raise this to be mischievous. I raise this because it constitutes a concern on which the opposition must speak. The people of Barbados further addressed insofar as to what has befallen the marine environment around the country in recent months. And therefore, if you will bear with me, I will endeavor to quote some extracts from that document, Mr. Speaker, beginning, in fact, with what is submitted as part of the abstract. The Barbados government, and I quote, welcome cruise ships to the island to use the Bridgetown port facilities and allow them to anchor along the west coast of the island during the early COVID-19 period of 2020. And a quote for the moment. The report is suggesting that while other countries did not facilitate this type of activity, Barbados did. The Honourable Minister commends us for our good-naturedness, and for our hospitality of spirit, if I may use that phrase. In that context, our manifestation of our own humanity and sense of humaneness by accommodating ships around our island at that time while other countries were turning them away. I continue to quote, "Many of the ships anchored more than once, which led to 132 anchor drops in total taking place. Most anchor drops occurred in March of 2020. The cruise ships anchored on the southwest and west coast of Barbados in relatively shallow water, less than 50 meters in depth, on sandy acres, hard coral patch reefs, and hard coral reef formations. Damage to bank reef coral communities was visually confirmed as being extensive. 1,000 square meters, several West Coast locations such as Bright Ledge Reef, Farm Reef, Horseshoe Reef. The potential area of habitat damage from all anchoring events was estimated to be in the region of millions of square meters. These are tough numbers, Mr. Speaker. Given the recognized value of coral reefs, as indicated by the stated fines in the Coastal Zone Management Act for damaging reefs, this equates to millions of dollars in actual damage and far exceeds any short-term financial gains from permitting visiting cruise ships to anchor for a nominal fee. That extract stresses the degree, to some extent, of the damage caused to the coral formation here in Barbados. And I ask you again, Mr. Speaker, I remind you, I'll be asking you to bear with me because there are several extracts to which I do want to refer, with your leave, of course. This is at page 50. In the case of Barbados, degraded reefs will impact the local reef fishery, which contributes to food security on the island and is important in supporting livelihoods, particularly during the flying fish off-season. Based on the official estimates of landings, the value of reef fishery in Barbados has been estimated at about 1.5 million Barbados dollars per year. The Honorable Minister cited the importance of fishing, and suggested that there would be bits of legislation brought to ensure that Barbados has a thriving fishing industry which is sustainable given all circumstances. I presume you're still with me, sir. I'm on page 52, and I will just quote a couple more extracts. Even with all the policies and plans, legislation, institutional arrangements in place that acknowledge the value of coral reefs to Barbados and which provide for their management, significant coral reef damage has still been allowed to occur as a result of unprecedented anchoring of cruise ships during the first months of the COVID-19 pandemic, indicating policy failure under a new situation. So despite whatever policies we have in place, of which we boast, this report's findings suggest that there was significant damage to the coral reefs around the island. Page 55. The damage caused to coral reef habitat in Barbados by the anchoring of cruise ships during the early stages of COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 is clearly extensive and yet could have been avoided. There is no compelling reason why cruise ships should have been allowed to anchor, since the same long-term benefits would surely still accrue to Barbados if cruise ships had simply been allowed to use the port facilities as required and to drift in the territorial waters in between enterings into the port. In fact, this practice has been adopted by several cruise ships that have chosen to remain in Barbados and have now spent many months drifting off the west coast. Of course, that was back then. The damaged coral reefs and other reef formations will take many decades to regrow, and the reef framework is unlikely to ever repair itself under current conditions of climate change. While it may be tempting to offer reef restoration as a solution, and we've heard something about that, this is not a practical option for the extent of the damage witnessed under this study, especially given the fact that the damaged reefs are in excess of certain depths. This research highlights policy failures in the management of coral reefs in Barbados that allowed cruise ships to anchor in coral-rich areas. It supports the recommendations of Schuman 2020 that the hidden values of natural assets, such as coral reefs, and the economic losses induced by their degradation should be incorporated into national accounting. The question, therefore, is how do we account for this significant loss, as is reflected on in the findings of this a credible report from a credible source? That would be the question. I am sure government would have been advised before it took a decision to allow for the activity that took place by this number of ships in this very wide, sensitive area, an essential part of our marine environment and of the potential for economic gains for this country. Now, what would have been the advice given to the government? Because I am sure that this government would not have taken actions in any ill-advised manner, and therefore could only have been acting upon the wise counsel of professional persons, experts in the field, people technically acclaimed and skilled, and people who are reputed to have the level of experience, expertise, and knowledge needed to advise government on these sensitive issues. Now, I therefore would want to believe that government acted with the advice of the Coastal Zone Management Unit or any other authoritative body charged with that responsibility. And if that is the case, that government did act upon that advice, question is, what was the advice given to government? My conclusion, based on this report I have read, and in the absence of any further redress or public address of the matter by the government, my conclusion is that somebody should be gone, Mr. Speaker. And when I say somebody should be gone, I am not gunning for the minister, I'm not pointing at the minister. I believe that governments act in these matters on the best advice available to them. And therefore, if they were advised in such a manner as to have felt that they had a green light to go ahead and take this policy decision, and it has turned out thus that this significant loss has been incurred by this country, both with respect to present as well as potential economic gains and potential economic gains not only in the immediate future, but in the far distant future as well. So who gave the advice? What is the advice that was given? Did government follow this advice with the best will and intentions? And in the context or against the backdrop, which is a more popular phrase, against the backdrop of this study, I believe somebody should be gone. And it would have to be somebody who tendered advice to the government, which turned out to be not so prudent. Somebody whose skills fell short. Somebody whose expertise reflected some deficiency. Somebody whose knowledge was not properly applied. Somebody who missed the mark on this occasion. This is not the loss of a bus that goes missing. This, Mr. Speaker, is the loss of millions of dollars related to the patrimony of this country, related to an environment which we should be seeking to exploit for more productive, positive tourism, revenue-generating purposes, and, of course, to provide a space for social activities as well. So if this report is true, and I have no reason to doubt because it comes from a credible source, a credible institution, and has been made public, I have no reason to doubt until I hear the government contradict it clearly. And if they have already, I missed that, but I invite them so to do again, because there may be others that missed it. But if they are in a position to say to this country, we operated not under the best advice, but with the best intentions, then my conclusion is, Mr. Speaker, that somebody ought to be gone. This is not a simple matter. More specifically, Mr. Speaker, to the bill in front of us, I believe very strongly that initiatives such as this, which are important, and I laud the minister for bringing it, and I laud him for his commitment to bring other very important pieces of legislation that will help to improve our marine environment, improve the context and arrangements within which shipping and various activities around our ports will be conducted. I look forward to those bits of legislation. I know he's a hard worker. Less of a talker these days, but a hard worker. And I have attributed the fact that he does not talk as much as he used to talk in this house to the fact that he's more engaged with actual work outside of this house. And I commend him for his diligence. Now, initiatives such as this, in my view, are very important, but they should be undertaken in a context of vision. You can't simply be looking to improve a port facility in an effort to comply with international requirements, agreements to which you have signed on. I'm not saying that that is a position of this particular minister. I believe he is driven of a vision with respect to these things. I'm not sure that that vision possesses the mind and soul of the whole of government. But I think he himself is driven with a sense of vision on these matters. But this, whatever we do to improve, enhance shipping arrangement, improve our infrastructure around shipping and the marine environment to make that potentially productive revenue generating capacity, whatever we do, we should do with a sense and in a context where it is a critical part of a wider vision for Barbados and for the Barbados economy. We have done a lot of things in this parliament which had to be done because we had to comply with institutional obligations internationally, globally. And that is a part of governing today. And that is a part of the reality. They have to be done, and you have to do them, especially if you are a signatory to these agreements. But the improvement of shipping facilities, shipping arrangement, port infrastructure cannot simply be an exercise in trying to meet those requirements. They must be seen as part of the overall effort to build out the Barbados economy, to construct a growth platform with meaningful goals and objectives which are realizable and that will bring benefits which should be shared across the economy and not in a skewed way to a few, which now is the case. You can consider energy. Barbados is a high import country, and we rely for our energy base, our energy supply, significantly so on imports of fuel. You can see, therefore, how shipping can impact energy. Energy is perhaps, I don't attempt to use a pun, but it's the baseline fuel for the economy. Energy drives the economy. And if you don't have kind of facilities that allow you being a high importer of energy, then you have problems. So you want to build the economy. If you're using the old traditional methods of energy supply, energy use, then we have to build out our shipping facilities and improve our shipping arrangements. Food production. We are still importing most of what we eat. Minister of Agriculture, honorable member of St. Philip South, has vowed that he will reverse that and substantially reduce our reliance on imported commodities for consumption. Food is one of those things. Very important. Survival of the nation, survival of its people, by the very important commodity in trade. A lot of the large businesses in Barbados principally make their money from retail or wholesale of food. And therefore, if you're going to have that aspect of an economy which is vibrant and thriving, the retail sector, wholesale sector, dispensing of goods of whatever nature, then as a high importer, you got to make sure that the arrangements available to you for shipping are such that your economy can keep going and only keep going, thrive, and be sustained. And I'm simply illustrating when you build out port facilities, when you enhance shipping arrangements, you're not simply meeting requirements under an agreement to which you've signed on, but you are putting in place additional architectural planks upon which you build an economy and platform it for growth. Construction, we are still importing a lot of our materials for construction from abroad. The honorable member for St. Michael South knows exactly where I'm going next. So does the honorable member for Christchurch West. We're still importing much of what we need for construction in Barbados. We can't properly build without reference to imported materials. Even in many cases, chattel house. But of course now we've gone to more modern Chinese structures. So we are reflecting our dependence upon imported raw materials for building. So we are now going to get many houses coming from far distant China and coming across the Pacific and to reach us ultimately so that we can have some houses constructed by December to alleviate some of the problems which we are now. That's a serious thing, and I'm not reflecting upon the Chinese imports right now. I'm talking about the broad issue of our reliance upon imported materials for construction. Construction, the honorable member for Christchurch East Central would tell us readily, has been a major plank in economic activity in Barbados over the past 25 years. In fact, this government has admitted to us that unless we can engage at this time in a program of picked up, enhanced construction activity, we run the risk of seeing social dislocation in Barbados such that we can have some form of eruption of the social type. for which we're not prepared, and of course, which we do not want to realize. So we're trying to put people back to work, government through its capital programs, whether it is doing renovation of public buildings, whether it is building roads along the West Coast, or in St. Michael Central, Mr. Speaker, many roads I see being constructed in St. Michael Central. And I'm presuming, Mr. Speaker, that when they leave St. Michael Central, since we're next door, they come in St. Michael West. And I see the affirmative nod of my honorable friend from St. Michael West Central, the Minister of Transport and Maintenance and water resources, etc. But construction is a major activity in building out this Barbados economy. Can't get away from that. There's a lot of work to be done in doing it. Even as we move towards new platforms for productive sectors in Barbados, even with respect to the energy sector, we will still need to build up capital structures that aiding that development. All I'm saying here, Mr. Speaker, when you improve shipping arrangements and when you build up your port architecture and infrastructure, you're doing so not because there's some maritime agreement to which you are a part, but you're doing so because you're driven by a sense of this is a vision of Barbados. This is who we want to be. And if we're to get there, then we must do this. Shipping facilitates all of this. Tourism, major plank of the Barbados economy still. Can we do it without improved shipping facilities, without improved arrangements for shipping? We can. Then the other side of that, because that's taking a look at it from the import perspective, Mr. Speaker, but the important business of export and export trade. We are consumers largely, not only price takers, we are consumers largely of every single thing under the sun. We are consumers of. But there has to be some renewal of our efforts to so reorient our economy and our business ourselves as a country that we see the importance of adding to that export element of what we do. We can't do that. I believe very strongly, Mr. Speaker, that we must seek as a country and a country in a region, and we could talk about the Caribbean region in narrow terms, CSME perhaps, but I speak in wider terms than that. And I thought the Caribbean, I'm looking Central America, I'm looking certain parts of the Caribbean. I've said this before. And how can we as a country build our export platform and with what commodities? And how can we so energize the business of manufacturing that we become big exporters of some commodities across this region, wider region, Central America, the Caribbean, Latin America, and beyond. It is hard to say we are price takers and we are consumers. That is representative of a stock perspective, of a stock vision, stall vision. But we must look beyond the now profile of the Barbados economy, which sees itself as a consumer of all things created by other men, manufactured by other men, other countries, and not lift the export profile. And I believe we need to do that, Mr. Speaker, in the context of this region. I am a regionalist, just like the honorable member, St. Michael South, attested. But a lot of the time, it's lip service being paid to this thing. We feel as Barbadians sometimes that we are getting the short end of the stick. That may be true sometimes, but I think that we ourselves are to blame for a limited vision of a future of this country exporting out of the bosom of the Caribbean in the context of a regionalized effort so that this region could impact the world. Trinidad has been long in the business of exporting, a good manufacturing sector, which has gone through some stresses in recent years. But Trinidad's vision has it cast in its eyes as far as Barbados. So we have everything Trinidadian in Barbados. And when they start exporting the products, they then start exporting the companies into Barbados. So Barbados is all Trinidadian. And the vision perhaps goes further than that, but I'm challenging us as a country and challenging us as a region to see a platform for regional export of products which are Caribbean, making their way into the world of the wider Caribbean, the world of Central America and Latin America. And I hear very much talk these days about Africa. And a lot of it seems to revolve around sentiment. And sentiment is fine. And sentiment is a very strong and positive dynamic. But we go beyond sentiment and recognize the economic value of doing certain things. And unless we can platform these economies soundly, we will never be able to experience viable growth in this day and age in which we live. So export capacity is extremely important, and shipping arrangements can help to bring us there and should be seen in that light. The whole element of competitiveness, the honorable member when he spoke would have alluded to this. If you don't have the type of arrangements of facilities that will make the business of shipping as easy as possible while keeping it safe and secure, then you're going to lose your competitive edge. Sources of shipping will look for other ports, and avoid you. So the whole business of competitiveness, and then if you can improve your shipping arrangements, you can also impact prices and access. And if you're building out an economy, these things are so, if we can't compete in this real world, we are doomed. And one of the things that will help us to compete is if we have a proper architecture, legislative architecture in place to make facilities for shipping and movement of vessels much more expeditious. The productivity capacity of a port, of any port, is enhanced by this. And I think the Honorable Minister again sought to allude to the fact that there have been some improvements. And you have to have a port which has such a significant level of productivity capacity. In other words, things happen expeditiously while staying safe and secure. Things happen expeditiously, so your port becomes an attractive facility to sources of shipping, and there are multiple of those these days. And we have to increase the productivity capacity of our port facilities by reference to the type of shipping arrangements that we accommodate, that we employ, that we implement, that we put in place. Globalization is impacting everything these days. It's not only impacting the movement of capital, it's impacting the movement of, it's impacting transportation, it's impacting technology. You, Mr. Speaker, like me, did not meet with the IMF today, but that's technology, and that's what technology can do for you. Those who are in Washington can stay in Washington and dictate from there. No need to travel. We can sit here by means of technology and take dictation from our masters from time to time. And globalization impacts capital and technology and transportation. And globalization impacts production, and significantly so. And an economy which is worth its salt pays careful attention to all of these matters, that it might find a sense of soundness, sustained viability, an economy with citizens universally, and not just some small select group, and especially of a certain hue or class, are made the beneficiaries. The legislation seeks to suggest further, more sophisticated use of technology in and around shipping arrangements. And, Mr. Speaker, this is not optional. The minister would never stand here and say we're doing this as an option. This is imperative. And if you want to keep in step with the rest of the world, and if you want to have certain complementarities, And if you want to have the type of mutually beneficial arrangements with other entities in the world, then you've got to make sure that you are abreast with the technologies. This is an imperative. This is not optional. Security that comes through small, seemingly small initiatives like an advanced passenger information system, that I think Barbados put in place successfully in preparation for the 2007 World Cup, led by the Honorable Minister, who is now the Honorable Prime Minister, and help to strengthen the security architecture, but also help to facilitate smooth and swift travel through the Caribbean by implementing the advanced passenger information system, but also putting in place a couple of other institutional entities that help to serve this region well, even to today. Technology is important for interagency collaboration, interagency architecture building. We can't operate as a silo. We don't live in this world by ourselves. The threats which we face are faced by others. The challenges which others know are known by us. The realities which constitute the experience of others also constitute our reality in several ways. And so by the connectivity of technology, we can strengthen interagency collaboration as we fight to keep off threats and as we fight to foster those wholesome dynamics around us that make life better for us. And the minister, that is Honorable Minister, mentioned matters of facilitation, and that is true. The question of monitoring, the question of policing, the question of networking. Technology helps us to get these things done at a far faster rate and a more secure fashion than it used to be the case. So this is not an optional exercise with the embrace of more sophisticated levels of technology or the incorporation of technology into the methods of doing some old stuff, renewing them and making them more functional. This is imperative. You cannot do without that. Now, I don't know, but I did some reading some time ago. I think I spoke about this publicly too, with respect to our status as a port. I know a few years ago, in terms of port profiles, the ports of the Caribbean and Latin America were seen in a rather negative light. That is when compared with others, in that there were 40% less efficient than ports elsewhere, places like Europe, some other places. I don't know the extent to which the port facilities in Barbados have improved. I'm sure that there has been some improvement. The Honorable Minister led us to believe that there was no improvement under the last administration. In fact, there was degradation, deterioration. But since he has come with his trust and new energies, there has been some significant turnaround, such that the Barbados port is highly recognized in certain fora, and to the extent that we are now finding access to seats on certain boards or commissions or what have you. But the question is, where are we when compared with the best for countries of our size or for regions of our size? Where are we? I'm sure we cannot be 40% less efficient, because I mean, efficiency is perhaps priority number one. If you can do it securely and without threat to safety, then efficiency of administration, of operations is perhaps priority number one. So where's the Barbados port? Now that was the Inter-American Development Bank as a source for that. The World Economic Forum says of Caribbean ports that we provided some of the worst quality service to be found in the world. Surely when they said that, they were not referring to any port in Bridgetown or Spikestown or elsewhere where we may have ports of which we are not aware. Surely they can't be referring to us. But the point is, if we know where we are, then we have to consider what can we do that we get to the next level. And in the past few years, in terms of that measurement, what is the distance we have traveled? In the past 3.5 years, what is the distance we have traveled? What is the ground that we have made up on other ports around us, in the region and beyond the region? We can't certainly be that lowly rated now with respect to the service quality that we offer, not with the honorable member of St. Michael South in charge of the business. Can't be that. So tell us what distance we have traveled, what ground we have made up in the past few years. He spoke a bit about supply chain dynamics. So important. COVID taught us this. Other things have taught us this in recent times. But high import countries like Barbados must be very, very cognizant of the positives and the negatives, and the serious negatives as well, operating around this business of supply chain dynamics. We are all now in this world subject to all of today's volatilities in the world. Volatilities with respect to trade, volatilities with respect to movement of capital, volatilities with respect to natural disaster impact, climate change. We're all subject, all of us, no matter where we come from, to these volatilities and vulnerabilities. And therefore, supply chain dynamics must be factoring highly in the consideration for policy when it comes to matters of shipping, because it has the potential, real potential, and has serious implications for impacting port logistics and port modernization. And I know that in recent times the port has gone into new headquarters on what you call that road, I don't recall. Down by the old site, they've gone into new headquarters. But that is administration. I suppose that is, to some extent, a center for managing operations as well. But the port itself, in terms of modernization, the port itself and the logistics around the port, entering and departing, clearing, offloading, supply chain dynamics have to be considered as to what we do in improving those areas with respect to our port operations. Supply chain dynamics has meant that we're now seeing construction of bigger ships, massive ships. Can we accommodate them here? How many of them can we accommodate at one time? And do we have to make them park, berth, anchor on the coral reefs while we wait to clear some other? So the experience that the world has gone through with respect to supply chain dynamics has resulted in this emergence of these larger mega ships, both for cruise and for cargo, carrying hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of containers across our oceans, many of which fall off, but many of which make it here. And when they make it here, we have to deal with them. Supply chain dynamics and consideration of that phenomenon must influence what we do with respect to our shipping arrangements. And our port honorable minister mentioned it himself, the movement of freight costs. He mentioned this, honorable minister did. It has impact for freight costs. And freight costs then has impact for the prices, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, if your wife is like mine, and she has to spend, she does not necessarily watch the dollar. She looks at the item. And if you are like me, Mr. Speaker, often when I shop, I don't watch the dollar, I watch the item too. And the point...
You're rich, honorable member.
Sorry?
You're wealthy, honorable member.
It's not because I'm wealthy, it's because I find sometimes shopping to be a nuisance. So I get it over with as quickly as possible. But the point we're making here, Mr. Speaker, the point we're making here, Mr. Speaker, is this. When freight costs and other costs go up because issues of supply chain come into play, then that has an implication for your pocket. And therefore, if your wife chooses, with more of a reference to the item than the cost, you could pay for it in your pocket, as I am sure you do, and you're pleased to do, because your aim is to satisfy her. And I hail you for that. I'm sure it does not only
Speaker,
apply.
sorry, just on a point of clarification, sorry.
I remember.
I am fascinated by the speech, but I am sure that the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, sir, isn't, without intention, advocating these paternalistic kind of views on women that would suggest a woman is going to go to a supermarket and spend a man's money randomly because women in Barbados are not capable of making one's own choices and making their own money. I imagine, sir, that's not where he's going, but I am enjoying the speech, I really am, but I just wanted him to clarify.
Continue, Honorable Leader of Opposition.
Just to be clear, and to have my honorable friend disabuse his mind of that fallacy which now possesses it, I simply say this, that there are some people who shop and their first consideration is not the price. In fact, there are many, men and women, and I did allude to females, and I did allude to myself, and I assure you I'm a male, in case there's any doubt. So it's not a female thing. There are individuals who pay attention to the item, the quality of the item, not so much to the cost. But whether or not you watch the cost or you watch the quality of the item, the point I'm bringing to my learned colleagues' attention is that when freight costs go up, for whatever reason, freight costs go up, and freight costs can be an offshoot from supply chain dynamics. When freight costs go up, then you feel it in your pocket, Mr. Speaker, and so does the honorable member, I'm sure. He's very well clad today, as he always is. That costs money. If he bought it today, it will cost more than it cost 3 weeks ago, because we all know in Barbados, prices are skyrocketing. Skyrocketing in Barbados is my experience. In Barbados is my lived reality. And prices are going up, and the question is, what is this government doing to bring down these prices to save some of these women and some of these men from this peril? And prices are skyrocketing. And we have ministers of government saying we can do nothing about the rising cost of energy. There ain't anything we can do about that. These prices are imported. Well, that's another story for another day. The point here is supply chain dynamics will impact costs, and that affects consumer purchasing power and consumer power, and shipping lanes also. The honorable member alluded to one ship blocking for many, how long did it last? In the Suez Canal, long time, and nothing can get through. Can you imagine that, Mr. Speaker? And high import countries are depending upon these commodities. You know what that delay means? That delay means, as the honorable minister said, rising costs, shipping lanes and freight costs. That's why we're seeing improvements in the Panama Canal, one of the major shipping lanes of this world. So we have to think about these things in a day when supply chain dynamics is such a prominent consideration. Inventory volumes and inventory management. And he mentioned it just in time, the old just in time model. You know, fellas will order just in time. It gets here just in time for school. It's the new school term. So I don't have an abundance of it in my warehouse. I don't have to carry those costs. I don't need added warehouse space because I'm believing in this just in time model. So I get it here just in time, and I order it just in time. And somehow that saves me some cost and so forth. But as a model that is being challenged now by these supply chain dynamics. Just recently, we had a volcano erupted next door in St. Vincent, And we ain't see bananas for a while. Yeah, we ain't see bananas for a while. You know how I felt when we weren't seeing bananas, Mr. Speaker? Sorry? Ooh. Sorry? 3 years no, we're growing bananas. I applaud you. I applaud you. That is absolutely comical. And I assure you, I will think of a comeback when you are on your feet next. I haven't seen, but Mr. Speaker, you're indulgent in this thing?
I'm listening.
You are. And, you know, there's some things that I might be a little bit hazy about.
Yes,
And some might even say, in fact, I've gone bananas. You know what I'm not hazy about? What is happening on the ground in some constituencies in Barbados, including Christchurch, East Central. Including Christchurch, East Central. I'm in no way hazy about that. I ain't going bananas or bunkers over that. That is a reality which the government will face, the honorable member will face and deal with or be dealt with. It's simple, and that is no problem. I have been here quite a long time, Mr. Speaker. Some of these fellows, honorable fellows, just come. They want to be here a while. And when I first came here, Mr. Speaker, I understood that I would not be here forever. So when I do have to go in the will of the Lord, I will go. I will go. I will go. So this matter of supply chain dynamics is very important. We want to save on warehouse costs, better prices position we want to attain. These things have to be taken into consideration. I'm very serious about these things, and there are those who don't understand these things who may have a sight. You know, there is a verse in the scripture which says, such knowledge is too high for me. Such things are too high for me. I cannot attain. And there are some, when faced with these things, resort to the trivial and sometimes the abusive. But I encourage them to a greater sense of enlightenment and understanding of the realities which face us and the people who live in their constituencies and who sent them here to debate and to vote in their interests, and who sent them to government to formulate and shape policy in their interests. My question is, what are some of the strategies for development around the Bridgetown port in anticipation for growth in Barbados? What are we doing to develop the Bridgetown port in the context of a vision that speaks not to just enhancing and modernizing a port, but speaks to the whole program of growth and development for this country? What is the true capacity of the port? What is the vessel capacity of the port? These are issues that we don't hear talked about often, and but they are important. I know it was proposed that there be a development for cruise terminal facility for smaller vessels in the north. I haven't heard about that recently, but certainly that would be an important, I'm not saying necessarily it would be an advisable move, but if it did take place, it would be an important consideration because it has implications for those who now operate around the main port, the main terminal in Bridgetown. It has implications for the communities of northern Barbados. It has implications for businesses in the northern parts of the country. And so it would be an important consideration. We haven't heard about that recently, at least I have not. Also been a proposal to develop the shallow draft facility in Barbados around Bridgetown for the improved chances of business, especially small business entities. And a whole set of businesses, small businesses, can thrive in an environment where there is shallow draft berthing. I know other marina sites, the other Caribbean countries who do very well with respect to that. We've all been there, we've all seen them. And it is a long time that we go beyond the point of talking about the wharf and seeing the wharf in negative context, but come to a place where we have, wherever it is located around the Bridgetown area, a proper marina facility that causes a whole new culture of business to be birthed there and to generate there. Also, it was being spoken in the past and proposed that there would be a separation of cruise ship facilities from cargo facilities. There is a body of opinion which suggests that in the now context that is not necessary. Barbados is getting movement from these ships, 3, 4, 5, 6 months here, November to April, and what's happening the rest of the time. And that the facilities we have now, though we have a single space, is adequate for the volume of traffic which we now have. That's one view. But then there's a contrary view that we need to have a separate cargo facility separated from the cruise transit facility, especially if we're going to be looking at bigger cargo vessels, especially if we're going to be looking at expediting the operations around receiving and dispatching of ships, much more so. Then perhaps we got to think about the separation. Home porting, and that brings in the airport. No, I'll talk about that today, but it brings in the airport as well as a seaport. Massive business for Barbados, and the Honorable Minister is steeped in a driven vision for seeing an enlarged ships registry and more ships in home porting in Barbados. All of that is good for Barbados business, part of development. And I understand that before COVID, in good times, in those months there, November, April, we could see about 400 to 500 wide-bodied stops of aircraft in Barbados. This is outside of Virgin and British Airways. Wide-bodied aircraft bringing into Barbados, thousands of people, multiple thousands of people who transferred from the airport to the seaport or vice versa. And this is good, and this has to be part of the vision. If we are going to be reliant on tourism, we've got to go away from, not go away from, but we should not rely solely on the state-old practice of bringing a few people, hoping that they spend a few nights in a hotel, spend some dollars, and that's it. We've got to develop the industry, develop the facilities. And while we're doing that, may I voice concern for the taxi operators in Barbados? I believe very strongly in a business called mainstreaming, Mr. Speaker. We got to mainstream people in Barbados. I said this when we debated the vending bill here recently. We got to mainstream people, the people who've been in vending for years in Barbados, but still on the periphery. We got to mainstream taxi operators in Barbados. We got to bring them into the mainstream and help them to avoid an existence on the periphery of the economy. And the large percentage of cruise traffic and air-to-sea transfer traffic, a large percentage is going to big private operators, understandably. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with them getting their share, because they've invested and they have the connections and they work assiduously at it. But at the same time that they are facilitated, and the same time that their slice of the cake is preserved, you got to find a way to mainstream other players into the business. And the lot of the taxi men, the plight of the taxi men has to be a concern and a consideration, because we need to properly mainstream them. That's what building an economy is about. It's about moving people from station A to station B, or the other way around. But it's a movement of people and bringing them into the mainstream. I've said here before, that old slogan of tourism is our business, let's play our part, never appealed to me, because there are too many people in tourism who don't play a significant part in terms of the share they get out of the benefits of tourism. And we want to get them on board ships, and I remember a cabinet meeting years ago saying in the presence of the then Minister of Tourism, we have to get more people from Barbados on board ships in this world, and in the cruise industry, in the cargo industry, massive enterprises, thousands and thousands and multiple thousands of people employed. And Barbados, with a fairly well-educated population, fairly skilled population. A player in tourism for all of these years must be driven by a sense of vision that we must find our space in that market as well. And not just doing menial jobs. No, a musician is fine. That's a highly skilled fella. And I hope that they're well paid when they find those jobs there. It is not just to clean the cabin or to wait upon somebody. These are necessary jobs. We want some of them too. But we want some of the more high-end jobs in the shipping industry. So it's not just to swell the numbers that are getting on board these ships and making sure that the environment is secure and safe and healthy. I'm reading some stuff here about something that happened in England, was it? Or somewhere with Barbadian workers being reduced to almost a slave existence. Look further into that. But we don't want a situation, or is it in the States, where people are exploited, but you want them into an environment where they are not simply subjected to menial servitude, even though it pays some dollars. But we want to mainstream them in this economy. And the Honorable Minister of Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy should well see it as part of his mandate to help with this business of mainstreaming people away from the bottom rungs of the economic ladder into midstream and beyond. If this government, with its large mandate, fails to do that in this respect and other respects, then it has really disappointed the people. And I trust to the energy, the sense of enlightenment of this honorable gentleman from Bailan. I trust to the efficacy of policy, that the vision will be driven by those considerations, and that we will see that type of thing resulting. I really want to quit. I have told you I wouldn't be long, and I reached my word. But look, Mr. Speaker, there are some issues that we have to certainly not close our eyes upon. Now, I know that this government lamented the fact that in the port there was very limited facility and utility around scanners to counter efforts in bringing in contraband and other substances undesired and illegal. And I know that this government expended money, or the port did, in improving the scanner capacity. And I heard today the honorable member say they've gone from 30 cameras as well to 200 cameras. I hope, sorry? 200 by the end of the year. I hope that they're all functioning cameras and not some of the duds that are placed in some place. I'm sure it won't be. But the point is, Mr. Speaker, since the improvement in the ability to scrutinize, examine cargo by electronic or technological means, what has been the improvement registered? The minister said about $1 million in contraband, something to that effect. It's a vague statement to me. I'm concerned about specifics. We have a problem with guns coming to this country, massive guns, got police frightened. And they're all over this place, in the hands of the good, the bad, and the not so good or bad, the indifferent, the ugly. And they're here. And where they come in, how are they getting here? And since we have had this improved capacity to scan cargo, have we seen an increase in the ability of the security people to get their hands on more of these weapons and drugs as well, Mr. Speaker? Has there been an improvement in the situation since we have enhanced our capacity for surveillance and for scrutiny? And we really need to be told in clearer terms, yes, we're getting more guns, X amount. We were here, now we're here. Drugs, whatever other contraband there might be. The situation has significantly improved. We need to hear that in more specific terms. I've always had a concern. I know it happens elsewhere, but I know it happens also differently elsewhere. I've always had a concern because of our capacity or incapacity at the port. Containers come into the port and they have to transit the port and go to private business locations before inspection is done. I think that still obtains. That is not a Barbadian problem. It happens elsewhere. I understand that in Jamaica, ways have been found to better master and manage that situation. I'll look into that. But I'm always concerned, Mr. Speaker. Any containers come out of the port and go to the private premises of a business of some sort, and then one or two customs people are delegated to go and scrutinize that, overlook that inspection, that examination. I'm always concerned as to the fact that we're exposing our officers to potential corruption. There are a lot of corrupt people in business in this world. And the reality is that there's some in Barbados. There are some in Barbados. And they are not averse to trying a thing or two on poor customs officers who are put to that exposure by the system. And I wonder if there's any plan in place to radically reduce the extent to which we rely on that type of inspection, that type of examination, that type of scrutiny. It's not the Honorable Minister's duty to speak to this matter, but I mentioned my concerns. Recently, we heard of news items of people being arrested elsewhere, involved in criminal activities related to running guns into Barbados. Now, I know that there are certain things that the policing and security and law enforcement authorities will not speak to publicly, and I understand that entirely. But my concern is that when we attract this kind of high-profile attention for the wrong reasons, then the country develops a reputation. And my concern is that this type of finding can be uncovered elsewhere, but nothing you hear around about it in Barbados. Not even an acknowledgement that it is true. Far less that, hey, we know who the connections are and we're investigating. There's a certain extent to which you can't say some things, but certainly the Barbadian public needs to be given assurance that if these things are true, the law enforcement authorities in Barbados are positioned to deal with them, and they feel a leave of the state authority to fully and properly deal with them, notwithstanding who may be at the center of them. And I am very serious about that. We're hearing now of some other thing today. I don't know, are you very careful with these social media things? Today of some other allegedly criminal movement with respect to guns and so forth. Mr. Speaker, we need to have this addressed. The democracy that you and I and others here and others outside of here are seeking to build is threatened by the pervasive practices of the unscrupulous among us who will abuse the deficiencies in our system to work their evil ends towards their greedy gains, notwithstanding how it affects us as a country and as a people, beyond our reputation, how it affects the reality that is our life in Barbados. And I believe very strongly that has to be dealt with. I've bored you for long enough, Mr. Speaker. These are just some concerns, considerations I have to raise. If my honorable friend, when he wraps up this debate, whenever that happens, Julie finds it the need to come after me in very robust terms, I will be back. I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that further consideration of this bill be postponed, and also to move the adjournment of the sitting of this House until the Tuesday, the 28th of September at 10 a.m.
Well, I know you to stop it. I didn't know you finished, eh?
Thank you, Secretary.
The question is that this honorable chairman be adjourned until Tuesday, the 20th day of September at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 20th day of September at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.